Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Today, I'm joined by former Washington special teams coach Ben Kotwica as we discuss a variety of topics relating to the NFL playoffs. Plus, we talk about some of his former players, Dustin Hopkins, Tress Way, and Troy Apke. We even talk a little bit about Joey Sly and his thoughts on him. Then I talked to former NFL scout Tyler Roman about some of Washington's rookies, why he still believes in Jamin Davis, just not inside. And we take a quick look at some draft prospects ahead of the Senior Bowl. You can follow Ben on Twitter at bkotwica44, BKOTWICA44, and you can follow Tyler at NFL Scout 21. You can read my work, of course, on ESPN.com. There's going to be a bunch of stories next week relating to the team name. Also, I'm making a push here to increase our YouTube reach. Subscribe to the Empire Media YouTube page, and you can see my interviews in addition to other shows on the Empire Network, from hockey to horse racing to the Beltway Sports Bros. It's very much appreciated. Again, Empire, AMPIRE, Media, YouTube. Before I share my conversations, a couple things. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Las Vegas coaching search. By the time you hear this, maybe somebody's already been hired. Josh McDaniels is the latest rumored name attached to that job. I highly doubt he's going to go there if the Raiders were planning to trade Derek Carr, or if he didn't have some say in whether they keep him or not. Like I've told you before, if it was up to the owner, sounds like they would trade him. But if McDaniels has a favorable opinion of Carr, as some in New England believe, then it's hard to see them moving on from Carr, unless they can grab another passer. Then it also depends on what kind of contract McDaniels receives. What kind of security does he have? Also, what did he learn from Denver after getting rid of Jay Cutler right away? But if he's not sold on Carr, knowing they would have to pay him the following year, then perhaps they should just trade him now, get some high picks, and move on. Ron Rivera will not be at the Senior Bowl, but I don't view this as some sort of crushing deal. Why? Because offensive coordinator Scott Turner and quarterbacks coach Ken Zampese will be there, and they're the quarterback experts and the guys who will work closely with any rookies they draft and have a great deal of say. Martin Mayhew, Marty Herney, the other scouts, and a few other assistant coaches will be there as well. There will be plenty of time for Rivera to meet with any quarterbacks they like, and trust me, a ton of work has already been done on dozens of quarterbacks, especially the rookie class. I'm sure some will freak out about Rivera's absence, but they shouldn't. Now, if they draft a quarterback without him meeting him at some point, as they did when Steve Spurrier was here and took Patrick Ramsey, completely different group, same owner, but different group, that would be a colossal mistake. But between the combine, pro days, and visits, there will be plenty of chances for the head coach to get to know any quarterback they're interested in. I also still think they'll have their next starter before the draft, mainly because the only quarterback I think many believe could start early is Kenny Pickett, and there's no guarantee he'd be there at 11. I'd also say if he were in last year's class, coming off the year he had this year, he likely would have ended up here at 19. I say that mainly because he's considered behind the other 5 quarterbacks who were picked in the top 15 last year, for whatever that's worth. But there's no guarantee he'd be there at 11. And I don't know that they'd want to take that chance. That's why I think that you'd probably have your guy before then and possibly take a guy after the first round. Okay, it's a longer show today, so enough from me. After this break, I'll be back with Ben Kotwica as we discuss special teams, the NFL playoffs, and a few current Washington players that he knows well. How has Tress Way become such a good punter? Folks, it's all in the details. Welcome back. Now here's my conversation with former Washington special teams coach Ben Kotwica. Well, Ben, it was a very crazy week for special teams last week, and as a former special teams coach and hopefully a future special teams coach, I'm sure you have a good perspective on it. And first of all, I do want to let people know, you've been involved in special teams for since about 2009?
Yeah, so I really earlier than that, John. I got in the league in 2007 with Coach Mangini and Mike Tannenbaum, who was the GM, and at that time, 7 and 8 did a little bit of both, defense and special teams.
Right.
And then when Rex got hired in 9, moved primarily over to the special teams side, assistant for a handful of years, and then obviously a coordinator in New York and Washington and down in Atlanta. So you mentioned the amazing weekend of games, not only from just a football fan perspective, but from a special teams perspective as well.
Yeah, and it was, and it's, and obviously, as you know, a lot of times special teams, they don't get discussed as much unless there's a huge play one way or another. And there were some of those, I guess you could say, well, San Francisco could feel really good about it because of how they handled it, whereas Green Bay is going to feel like that cost them their season. So I am curious, like from a special teams perspective, when you watch that, what are you looking for? Like you watch Green Bay give up the block punt. What kind of things are you looking for as a special teams coach that give you a clue as to what happened and why, and what separates a good special teams unit from a bad one?
So a couple things to unpack there. Yes, as a special teams coordinator, as a coach, you look at the games differently. I think any coach that's watching it watches it with a little bit different eye than any fan. The unique thing about this weekend was the impact that special teams played in all the games, right? So you had game-winning field goals with Cincinnati. You had a game-winning field goal, obviously, with San Francisco, Green Bay. Matt Gay hits the game-winning field goal against the Rams. And so what was cool is that came to light. You also asked what separates good special teams units from others. There's a handful of things, I think, first and foremost, the organization and the head coach's decision that, hey, this is going to be an emphasis. I would suggest to you, much like the offensive side and the defensive side, it's very important to have key players in essential spots, right? So like on the offensive side, obviously it's a quarterback driven league. That's very important. The left tackle being able to protect. On the defensive side, I think the playoffs have shown if you've got a pass rusher and you're able to cover in the back end with a good corner, you're going to be a little bit more successful. I mean, I just think of what the Rams have done with their pass rush against Brady last week. And obviously San Francisco's done a really good job with their rush. So in the special teams world, John, I would say kicker, Baltimore this year, again, was number 1 in the Goslin rankings. We also did a rankings for the 33rd team. Baltimore was number 1, and they have arguably the best guy that's done it in Tucker. And they're also good at the punt position and the returner. So if you can have those 3 components and you look at it as another phase, I think you're going to have a leg up on a lot of the other teams in the league.
When you look at again, Green Bay had a really tough year with that. What's the difference? Like, again, in that, like you watch that block punt, I mean, they're coming through the line, right? But what's the difference just with the line play or anything like that, the coverage units that, again, separates something like that from being in the top half? In addition to what you said about the kicker, the returner, and all that.
Yeah. So then, I think you need some core guys that are going to end up helping you out, whether that's your 5th DB or your 5th linebacker. I always used to use the term the flag bearer, right? Who's the guy that's in the room that's setting the current and setting the culture for that unit. You had mentioned, yes, Green Bay had struggled. They were 32nd in the league in the special teams world. And I can assure you, with Coach LaFleur, an excellent coach that he is, that's an area that he's going to look at. And it's like anything you do at the end of the year now, 28 teams are conducting their needs analysis for the offseason. And that's obviously an area that, Green Bay is going to look at, whether it's all perspectives of it. It's coaching and personnel and scheme. So I could say with a high degree of certainty, Matt's going to take a deep dive into that in this offseason.
When you look at the Buffalo game too, because the end of the game, 13 seconds left, and then there was talk with the Bills, do you squib kick, or do you kick it out of the end zone? What are the pros or cons of each of those? Because a squib kick, you could have maybe, I don't want to say pooch kick because it's not a pooch, it's a maybe hit your wedge to the 5-yard line, right?
Sure.
Or do you kick it out of the end zone? What are the pros and cons of those situations? And were you okay with them kicking it out of the end zone?
Yeah, so I think always hindsight is very easy to look at.
Absolutely. It's the easiest thing to do.
No doubt about it. I would suggest to you that some have made that that should have been a very clear decision for Buffalo to squib kick that. I would make the argument that, yes, in hindsight, you look back, yes, to squib kick it, run the clock, maybe give them one way would have been the way to go. However, I would share with you, John, those decisions aren't as easy as, some may think. Okay,
Right.
So a couple different factors that I looked at. First off, if you remember a few plays earlier, I think it was in the fourth quarter, Kansas City had returned a punt 45 yards.
Correct.
Tyreek Hill made like 6 guys miss, number one. Number two is before that, he hit a 64-yard touchdown where he just simply outran everybody.
Right.
So, Buffalo may have been scarred by those 2 plays. And sometimes the thought there might have been another thing to unpack is that, hey, listen, we're going to kick this ball off and we're not going to lose it on this play. We're not going to win the game, but we're not going to lose it on this play.
Right.
And then we're going to put our number 1 ranked defense out on the field, which Buffalo is, if I'm tracking the statistics correct. So those are other elements that go into your decision-making process. And I would also share with you 2 other things. Number 1 is that I saw a stat, and somebody might be able to back me up on this, is that 64 times over the course of, I don't know, a certain amount of time, teams have been in that situation where they had the ball at the 25-yard line, needing a field goal with less than 20 seconds to go. And the number of times that the offense was able to successfully do that was 0. So the probability of that happening was low. But on the flip side of it, if you look at the 2018 AFC Championship game, when New England played Kansas City, the score was 31-28 with about 39 seconds to go. New England elected to, or they did because of the conditions, kick the ball off. Kansas City returned it. I think it was to their 31 or 32-yard line. And 2 plays later, Mahomes was down to the 21.
Right.
So those are just factors that go into it. Again, hey, should you have squib kicked it? Yep, no doubt about it. But one of the things that I would have looked at specifically was number 10 back there, because he had just gutted me for 64 on a pass play, and he gutted me for 45, making 4 or 5 defenders miss.
Yeah, I also wonder with the squib kick too, because if you mishit that, they may have the ball at the 35 right now. Is that do kickers, are there some who just maybe don't handle that kick as well in addition to what you said? So how much can that be a factor too?
A big factor. So on the squib kick, I remember talking to a coach, it was sometime during this week. He had said that they had done a study on the squib kick, and the average starting field position on a squib kick was somewhere between, I wrote it down, like the 34 and the 40-yard line, right? So number 1 is you're going to give up some field position. Yes, if you can take some time off the clock and make it a 1 more play game, that's a decision. But also, when you are executing that squib kick, think about it. That can be if that's a line drive squib kick where the ball is fielded that guy's going to catch that ball on the run. And Tyreek, a speed player can gain 15, 20 yards in less than 4 or 5 seconds. So I just don't think it's as clear cut. Obviously, in hindsight, squib kick would have been the play to make there. But and then the other thing, John, is until you're in those shoes, you're an Arrowhead, it's loud. You don't have 3 to 4 minutes to discuss this, right? I think probably Coach McDermott and Coach Farwell, who was a special teams coordinator, were maybe discussing that as the drive was moving. But my point to you is those things happen fast. It's loud, it's chaotic, and you got to make the decision. And it seems like Buffalo said, all right, listen, we're not going to lose it here. We'll just kick it deep. We'll put our defense on the field and we'll stop them in 2 plays.
So when we're watching the coach on the sidelines, because they're going to show the special teams coach before those big plays, the field goal guys coming out, they're going to show the coach, and you're going to stand there like this, oh yeah, this is no big deal. What's it like inside? What's it like? What's that feeling inside when you're going to watch your kicker go out there? Well, first of all, let me take that back. When you see a guy, when your team has a blocked punt or blocks, like your Green Bay special teams coach, what's that feeling like inside when it's your team that has a negative go against it? And it's hard to imagine.
It's not. So you mentioned, when do they show the special teams coach? When bad things happen.
Right.
That's kind of the mantle of leadership that you accept in this role. It's this position that, all right, it's just a kickoff or it's just a return. And, 90% of the time it's, the guy's not on TV, but you're right. When it is a blocked field goal or you give up a return for a touch, unfortunately, it hasn't happened to me a ton over 15 years,
right.
But yeah. What does it feel like? So I would assimilate to the listeners out there, when the kicker goes out there, if you've got children and they play baseball and there's bases loaded, there's 2 outs and your son or daughter is going up to bat, that's kind of what it feels like. What's it like when the block occurs or when a great play occurs? It's your son or daughter just hit the 2-run double to win the game. Awesome. Or they took strike 3 on the outside corner and
there with all that.
So I try to not the same, but similar. But that is similar to what that feeling is like. So that may relate to the view or the listeners out there a little bit.
Well, that's what I imagine. Cause do you say anything to the kicker before you go? Like, does anything need to be said to a kicker before you go out there? Or do you say something just out of habit because you feel like, well, I'm the coach, I should say something? Or you kind of base it on like the individual, like this guy doesn't need me to say anything, just go do it?
Yeah, I think it's a people business, right? And so I think part of it is understanding the relationship that you have with that player and what their needs are. I've been fortunate to have a handful of kickers. Younghoe Koo, the Pro Bowl guy down here last year, obviously Hop. When I was in Washington, I had Nick Folk, who's really resurrected his career. He's done a tremendous job. I had him when he was in New York, and each kicker is like your children. They're different, and some will want more talking to. Some are just, hey, listen. Now, I would share that there's continuous dialogue throughout the course of the game, whether it's what, in the situation that we're talking about here, John, is like a game-winning kick. Hey, which hash would you like it on? Where do you feel comfortable? A lot of times you hear like, hey, the 35 is the line. But, if you're playing outside, especially maybe in Washington, over the course of 3 hours, conditions will change, whether it's the wind or precipitation or whatever. So I think that dialogue is always occurring. And the number one thing is knowing the player. And some will want, some encouragement. Others, they just let them go. And here we go, field goal. We're going out there. So, and it's the same thing, like whether they, if they miss it, right? Sometimes you just want to get information of why. Was there something there that I need to know about? A lot of times it's just, no, I just didn't hit a good ball or something along those lines. So player specific. What's the hardest stadium you think for a kicker? There's a couple that come to mind. I don't think Washington is an easy place to kick. Not only just because of the conditions, the field condition as well, especially later in the year, John, when it gets chewed up a little bit, those grass surfaces. I think Chicago can provide some challenges, not only with the surface, but it's right off of Lake Michigan. I was in the AFC East there for years. Buffalo is a swirling situation with the wind. That's my experience. And plus it's cold. Cleveland, can be a tough place to play. So those Northeast, AFC North stadiums, again, Cleveland, the NFC North, which would be Chicago, Washington. I've been in old Giant Stadium and I've been in MetLife. I do think just maybe it's the way it's constructed. Like MetLife Stadium is more conducive than the old Giant Stadium to kicking.
Well, that wind with the big door that they would leave open, right?
Right, the doors. But those are the ones that really come to mind.
And then you mentioned Dustin Hopkins, and obviously he was released here this year, and it seemed like he always had that really good leg with the inconsistencies. What did you see in him early? And I'm sure you followed him throughout. What did you see with him as a kicker? Why do you think maybe there were some of those inconsistencies, besides the fact that it's a hard thing to do?
Yeah. So first off, when we acquired Dustin, if I think back, we were in that transition. Kai had done a really good job for Washington for many years. we were looking to make the transition. So that at that time, Hop was in New Orleans in their preseason. So we were keeping an eye on him, and the leg talent pops out at you. I think he's really quick to the ball, which helps getting the ball off quickly. He had leg talent, so he gave you touchback ability, and also gave you the opportunity with the leg talent where he would he could hit it high and you could cover it. And so the kicking is it's a little bit up and down, and maybe sometimes different. And I would say that if you look at his I don't know how many years was he there. I can't remember. Was it six
or yeah, I think it's six.
Yeah, about 6 years. I mean, that's a pretty good run for a kicker. And so my point is that sometimes that shelf life ends and he'll go somewhere. And he's been in LA with the Chargers and made a couple extra points. I think field goals there when they played that great game against the Raiders. I know he hit a ball there. So, and the other one that comes to mind is like a Matt Gay. Matt Gay is the Pro Bowl kicker for the Rams. He was a Tampa Bay guy. He was a Tampa Bay guy that ended up getting cut. So sometimes it's a little bit like being on the PGA tour. Remember when Spieth was winning all the majors and he's going to win them all. Well, there's other good players out there. So, but I think Dustin's still got some meat on the bone, and it's good to see him, and hopefully he continues his career out there in LA. And it seems like Joey has done a pretty good job there in Washington, if I've been tracking it.
Yeah. And have you watched him? Because he did do a good job. He's also built, he's also probably the most muscular kicker that I've seen in a long time, maybe ever.
Yeah, Joey's yoked up. So I didn't watch all his kicks this year for Washington. I had familiarity with him when he was in Carolina, when I was in Atlanta. Another exceptional leg talent kind of guy. I think when he's hitting the ball right, he's as good as anybody out there. And it looks like he knows where the weight room is. So hopefully that transition or that transaction has solidified that position for Washington, and kind of like the punting position. I mean, we don't talk about it, but we got Tress in 2000, and I got there in 2014, and we took him, and he's been there for 7 years now. And so, anytime you can solidify.
Yeah. Why is he developed so well? Because when he came here, and he's really developed in multiple facets. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think a handful of things. I think so with Tress, we got him off a Chicago squad. We were looking again. We were in the transition. So when I acquired Tress, is the leg talent was there, had another good leg. I think where he has developed is more with not only his pooch punting, but also his directional ability. We had worked for years. And again, he was a young punter coming in. So it's not like those things happen overnight. So, I think like in 14 and 15, all right, we're just working on ball striking consistency. Let's be able to hit a good ball with hang time. And the thing with Tress, where he started out, is he would drive the ball a lot down the field, but he's done a tremendous job of balancing his hang time over his distance in the field punts. He can still hit a huge ball that goes 55, 60 yards, but I think he's got more balance there. Number two is we worked extensively on the pooch punting, the ability to get the ball inside the 10, 5-yard line. And then his directional, where he is a left footer, and think of it as a golfer. He was always hitting the draw. So he had trouble going to the left. So my last couple of years in 17 and 18, we really worked on that. And it looks like Coach Nate has done a really good job of continuing that. And, I'm just really happy for him, because Tress is a really good man too.
Well, Tress is a good guy. And it's funny because I will say, we always talk about his first game punting in the end for you guys. I think it was a loss against Dallas, maybe something like that, but it was a loss. And he was the happiest guy in the locker room, because man, it's just so great to punt in the NFL. And it was endearing. It wasn't, it was you guys lost, but he was so upbeat that you got a sense of his personality right away.
Yeah, I was fortunate during the time there to be surrounded with guys like Tress and Hop and Nick Sundberg, for those years as the long snapper. And you asked, a few minutes ago about, what makes a good unit. And when you can have that solidify that battery, that really helps. And I was fortunate to have that for a few years.
how does the guy work so much? Because like everybody wants to improve on something. I guess it's a golfer being able to hit different shots, but it just seems like with the punter to be able to hit all those shots, like what goes into being able to be better at kicking to your left if you're left-footed, or to hit those pooch punts, because those are different techniques, I would imagine.
A lot of behind the scenes work that that typically fans don't see. I think that we see the Sunday at 1 o'clock. I think, John, what goes on behind the scenes to be one of the 32, I mean, really, that's what it is. Takes a lot of work. And it's not only the on the field work, John, it's the film study, and not only film study of yourself, but looking at other punters that, hey, that's what I want it to look like. And so there's a lot of work that goes on. And I think that if you saw it, you'd have a really, really great appreciation for the work ethic that those people, that those players have. And going back to Washington, there's been no players that worked as hard as the group that we had there.
And that's why I say with trust, because you don't improve if you're not doing it. And when we're out at practice, like they're going to take breaks. You got to save the leg. You got to do this. But clearly, he's working a lot on that in the off season as well, but I just wonder, because not every punter can do that. So is there something about him that enabled him, in addition to the work, is there something about the kind of athlete he is, or is it just like he just puts in more work?
Yeah, no, I would say it's a combination of those things. He's obviously got clear physical talent. Just to give you a quick synopsis there, like one of the things that we really worked on with Trester in my early time there was catching and molding the ball. And so there's different phases to punting, right? You got to catch and mold, and those that are familiar with punting will hear about the drop.
You say catch and mold. What do you mean by mold?
Catching the ball off of the
right?
center. Yeah, catching the ball and then getting that ball positioned quickly where I'm going to mold it to punt it. And, one of the things there is, if you remember, like Sundberg had one of the highest velocities of any long snapper out there. I mean, if there's one thing that Nick Sundberg could do, is he could zip the ball back there. And it took Truss a little bit of time to get used to or accustomed to the speed of that. So we would get on the jugs machine every day. And that was one thing that behind the scenes that we did. So we'll see how it shakes out, and hopefully he's able to continue to improve, and just happy to see where he's at right now.
Were you able to watch DeAndre Carter as a returner much?
No, I remember him I think he was at Houston before he came to Washington. And I think we had played against him, whether I was in Atlanta. I think it was in Atlanta. And I remember some twitch ability to make the first guy miss. But it seems like he's done a nice job there in Washington. I haven't watched all his tape.
Yeah, he has. You're right. He's got the twitch. I think one of the things that's helped him this year is he didn't put the ball on the ground. And that was a problem in the past. But he returned one for a score, and I swear I thought he was going to return a couple others, because I think he has that ability. Another guy that I want to ask about was Troy Apke. You guys drafted him in 2018. You were there.
Yeah.
And he's developed into, like, Nate certainly considers him one of their core players as one of the gunners and all that. But he, sometimes I know fans, they want to see big plays from a guy like that, because you feel like, hey, you're taking a roster spot. What's your take on Troy?
So I remember when we drafted Troy out of Penn State. The thing that hindered him a little bit during my time there was his injuries. He was right on the cusp of being what you were looking for out of the player in that role. What was that? It was a backup safety and a core special teams player that could play on all four phases: punt, return, kickoff coverage, kickoff return. But then what happened there, John, is, he had a hamstring injury, which really slowed him down. Handful of things. One, reliability, consistency. You knew what you were getting there. He knew what to do. That's one thing that a lot of people don't realize, like in the special teams world, is like that player that is a core special teams player, John, they've got to be one of the sharpest players on your roster. Why? Because they have to master what they're doing on special teams. And then with a broken chin strap, they're going to go have to play defensive or offensive football. So, so those players that have that dual role ability, and they're asked to do that, they've got to be very, very smart football players. But had very good straight ahead speed. Had a mindset to do it and a will to do it. So it's good to see that he's evolved there, and that Nate relies on him, or is going to count on him. Sounds like for the next years to come.
It does. Now, I guess the other part is we didn't see him make a lot of plays. So in that role,
yeah.
What's the impact? What impact should he have? Is it when you're coming out? Is it taking up a block, or just giving yourself up? Should he be making big plays? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
What would you expect from that?
Right. So in the coverage aspect of it, where it gets highlighted the most, if you're a perimeter player as a gunner on the outside, you'd like to see either forcing fair catches, or making the play, B, forcing fair catches, or C, making that player redirect. And then in the kickoff coverage game, if you're covering, obviously very similar. But what'll happen sometimes, Joe, is these coaches that across the league are smart, and you're going to try to take away oftentimes a team's best player. So if Troy is evolving into a player that the other team has to account for, a lot of times we'll call it the double vice on the outside. That's where the double vice will end up being. And so that'll also happen in the kickoff return game, where they execute their double team block on a player like Troy. So sometimes it's almost a function of, hey, he may not be making those plays. And again, I haven't gone in depth and studied his film.
Right.
But it could be a case where, hey, maybe he's not making the tackles, but he's forcing the opponent to account for him, and therefore it's opening up other opportunities for other players.
How many guys would a special teams coach get to keep? When you were here, like, how many would Jay let you say you get? 3 guys, 4 guys? How many guys would you get?
Yeah, Jay was great with it. I don't know if it was a function of like, hey, you get to pick 2 or 3 guys. I would share with you that it's a constant discussion and dialogue that you have, not only with the head coach, but the defensive and offensive coordinator. And so that's what's really cool about being in those buildings, is you're part of a problem solving set, that, hey, as you come out of free agency and the draft, and again, that's where your talent acquisition occurs, is it's very, very important to identify, hey, where's this guy going to fit on the roster? And then the other thing, John, is it's very dynamic. I mean, you see it. I saw somewhere, one of these teams played like 92 guys this year. I mean, so my point is that the roster that you may set, like, hey, how many guys do you get to pick? That may be a certain set like in August and early September, but by the time you get to Thanksgiving, the roster looks a lot different. So that's another thing that happens in these buildings and these organizations, is those dialogues of, hey, this guy got hurt, or for whatever reason, we're moving on from this player, and now we're going to bring this other player in. What value can he bring to offense, defense? And then that's where the special teams coach comes in as well.
But you talk about 92 guys, like, and I know this team late in the year had all sorts of injuries, and that's going to trickle down to special teams, because you're bumping guys up, and a lot of the replacements going to special teams, which makes it tough for a coach. But I also want to ask you about, they have a receiver here, De'Ami Brown. He was a 3rd-round pick. Now, he only caught a couple passes, and he had some injuries and all that, but they really liked what he was showing on special teams. So I'm curious from your perspective, like, and he was playing gunner, and, like, what kind of things in your experience, can a receiver learn playing a gunner role that can translate, and how often would you see that success built here carry over to there?
Yeah, so I just made a note there. Yeah, so, at the receiver position, especially with the offensive guys, what value are they going to bring to the special team space? So the receiver, is he a return guy that can return punts and return kicks? It sounds like Brown, as you were mentioning, is more of a coverage type of receiver. I can remember when I was in New York years ago, a receiver, Wallace Wright, that was like the 5th receiver, kind of the blocking receiver guy. Knew what he was doing, but was really good in the coverage aspect of it. So like the receiver, what you have to do is just help, a lot of times you like to teach them, like, hey, it's sameness and likeness. So at the gunner spot, like, hey, your release in this situation is very similar to your release off the line as a wide receiver. The big aspect on the offensive players is the ability to tackle. And that gets to be one of the challenges, is because the number of contact practices, even in the spring, right? In the spring, you're not in any pads. So bringing guys to the ground is very, very limited. So as a coach, you've got to be creative and innovative on how you're going to reconstruct those scenarios where those players are going to tackle. The linebackers and the safeties, they've got a lot of tackling experience from their time in college, but it's the wide receiver that not only do you got to teach to, how to tackle, but more as importantly is leveraging. How do you want to leverage this football so other players can get in on the play?
So if you see him like the reason why I even asked about it is because obviously you haven't seen him, but they felt like he became more physical, and you saw some competitiveness out of him trying to work back in front of guys, like if he's going to help double team down the field on some other things. How can that translate for him to offense in future years? And where can it help him develop as a receiver playing that role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think two areas, like, so what I'm hearing is like, hey, this guy is playing special teams. How can it help him evolve as a receiver?
Yes.
I think there's two aspects of it. One is on the outside, as I mentioned to you, with the releases, right, which is very similar to a wide receiver position. And then the physical aspect of it, not so much maybe on the coverage aspect, like in punt, but in kickoff return in regard to use your hands, body position. And again, a lot of times you see, for lack of a better term, the graduation or the evolution of a receiver or a player where they're using skill sets, whether it's in blocking techniques, body position, hand placement, where they can begin to graduate to the offensive side as maybe a third down run blocking receiver or something along those lines. So there are transferable skills, because at the end of the day, football is still, it's still blocking and tackling to a degree. It's a huge element to it.
Ben, last thing, I appreciate your time, but what's your future here? What are you still hoping to do?
Yeah, I'd love to get back in. So as we touched base right when we started, the cycle is spinning. So there's contacts that'll be made today. Have great relationships with guys across the league, and but the year out's been good. It allows you a little bit of a recharge and a perspective. So John, we'll see how it shakes out over the next week to 10 days, and love to be back on an NFL sideline next fall.
Well, good luck with that. I appreciate you joining me. And for further insight, it's the 33rd team. You can sign up, subscribe to that email, and there's really good insight from former coaches, general managers, executives, and I always enjoy reading. So thank you very much, Ben.
Awesome, John. Thanks for having me.
After this break, I'll be back with former NFL scout Tyler Roman, host of the Roman Around the NFL podcast, why he never thought Jamin Davis was a fit in the middle, and what quarterback in this draft has caught his eye.
4 teams remain in the NFL playoffs, and that means only 4 teams left for you to bet on at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Counting down to Super Bowl 56, new customers can get 56-1 odds on any team. Bet just $5 and get $280 in free bets if your team wins. Not a new customer? You can experience the conference championships with same-game parlays. Combine multiple bets from the same game for a bigger payout. The more legs you add, the more money you can win. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code KEIM, K-E-I-M, and get 56-1 odds on any NFL team. Bet just $5 to win $280 in free bets if your team wins. That's promo code KEIM for 56-1 odds at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL.
Welcome back. Now here's my conversation with Tyler Roman. Well, welcome back, Tyler. It's been a minute since I've had you on, unfortunately. And, there's obviously, now we're getting into draft season and there's a lot going on. But first of all, I want you to tell people how they can hear, follow, listen to you.
I have the Roman Around League podcast with Empire Media. I have an episode out every week. I actually have an episode out right now talking about top offense for the 11th pick for the Washington football team, or soon to be Washington, whatever, in a week. I have an episode drop every week. You can follow me on Twitter at NFL Scout 21 and Instagram at Roman League _pod. And you can get the podcast wherever you get your podcast.
There you go. And so I want to get about 1 or 2 of those guys that you're talking about at 11, but let's start off with last year's rookie class, because going forward, these guys have to play a role here. We already know they're here. Jamin Davis, Were you surprised at some of his struggles this year inside, especially?
No, not really. I didn't think he was an inside linebacker at the time at Kentucky. He was very raw at Kentucky. He only really started 1 year. There, he really was forced into action because of the unfortunate injury of a teammate who suffered a stroke. But Jamin Davis really showed out that 1 year at Kentucky where he was able to play and really start the whole season. I love the way he played in space. He showed good ball skills. He had a few interceptions, took one to the house at Kentucky. There was definitely upside in that pick. But like I said, I knew he was going to be a year or two process coming into the NFL. So, I'm not very too surprised the way he played his rookie year.
And I heard from people before the draft too that were very mixed on him inside, and they felt like, yes, a good outside linebacker prospect, not inside. Why didn't you think he would translate inside? Really,
it's just because I thought he plays more freely when he has less on his plate. You could tell he's more of an instinctual player. He likes to read and react. And I think it's more at depth for an outside linebacker. Middle linebacker is a lot more on their plate, calling plays, getting everyone set to a certain extent. So I just feel like he felt more freely when he had the responsibility to just go play ball, see ball, get ball kind of thing. So, I just thought I really thought I didn't think they were going to put him the mic when they drafted him. I thought they were going to put him outside and just, let him go, but they didn't. And I really thought it was a mistake from the jump. And really that pick last year, I really was more of a favorite Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. So I thought they really should have went after.
Me too.
Exactly. But now
I like that guy a lot.
And he had a really good year with Cleveland as well. But it makes more sense now that they were trying to pigeonhole him to a middle linebacker, and J.O. Cake isn't a middle linebacker. Right. So they were trying to, either way, they were looking for a linebacker at that spot. They went with Jamin and tried to do that, and now it didn't work out. So at that point, if you have an outside linebacker that Jamin Davis is, at that point, you could have picked J.O.K. But again, that's besides the point now. Jamin's who they got. I still am high on Jamin. But again, I think it's going to be a process where he has to stay on the outside because that's where he's more comfortable. But then that breeds a situation where I've even heard on your podcast before that if he plays, you got Holcomb as an outside linebacker, then you have Landon Collins coming back. So it's going to be a real weird situation for them to handle out because obviously not all those guys can be on the field at the same time.
Yeah, and like I said, in our ESPN mock, I put Koramoah there, and I knew they liked him, but I liked him more, so I went with that. But I think he played exactly the way he showed in college. With Davis outside, last one on him, why do you think, what do you think about his future there? Like, what do you think his ceiling could be, seeing him in college and now seeing him this year?
If he reaches his full potential, he can be a, top echelon starter of the league linebacker, like top 15 linebacker, maybe top 10 if he hits. So, because his athletic ability has never been a question. The guy runs
it's really good. And his coverage ability was good too this year.
Exactly. And that's what I saw in Kentucky too. He has good ball skills, especially for a linebacker. Again, if he is just allowed to, get more experience, he needs more reps. He needs more reps to see and diagnose plays in front of him. We saw his two standout plays this year were really, the one was a fourth down stop against the Bills where he basically suplexed out of the ground in the last game of the year against the Giants. Again, was allowed to read and react, go get ball. So, I think if he's allowed to get more reps and get more experience, I think, again, he has a very bright future in this league. And that's why I'm a little puzzled to see why he didn't get as many reps as last month of the season with the, team really kind of out of it. I to get in, that he needs the reps. He's a guy that, really could benefit from him. So, again, with more experience and more reps, Jamin Davis definitely can be a good starting linebacker in the NFL.
And I'm hoping that they give him more opportunity. And I know he did do some rushing, but in that last game, the last interception by McCain, that was forced by his blitz up the middle. It was a hell of a blitz. And I think, I'd like to see more of those kind of pressures from him next year because that's how he can contribute too. That's where he's got size, length, and speed and athleticism. Got to use it. So next one, Sam Cosby, what'd you think?
Cosby looked really good. I think him and John Bates probably were the best picks of last year's draft class so far. Cosby is a guy we love to see him play the full 17 games. Obviously, their ability was a little bit questioned. He even missed some time in college with some injuries as well. So they need to hold up on that side. I think eventually he could be a left tackle. I know they locked up Leno, but obviously Cosby's been the right side for their foreseeable future. But I'd like to get him a little more, see him a little bit stronger, the point of attack. I think he needs to clean up some of that technique to really be an upper echelon right tackle in this league. But I was impressed with him. I thought it was a good pick. It was good, a second round pick that you can plug and play on that right side from day one.
I think he's got some physical. He played well in the run game. And, I felt like he was physical there. Do you agree?
I agree. I like his athleticism too. He can pull too. He's not like a Trent Williams type of athleticism, but I think he ran a sub 40. You definitely could see that in him. So I definitely see him in the run game because I think he's a good puller as well.
Where do you see him staying on the right side? I mean, Leno's going to be here for a few more years, but do you see Cosby just staying on the right side? It seems what do you think?
I see him staying on the right side, like you said, for right now. Obviously, Leno is locked up. I think he can play left tackle. That's what he predominantly was at Texas. Obviously, he's not going against the best pass rushers in the nation in the Big 12, but he did hold up pretty well in the Big 12. So I think he definitely can do it on left side. And maybe that's something they, look at in year 3. Maybe they give Leno one more year left side. He's going to be 30, 31. Maybe they transition that towards the contract and they switch opposite sides. Cosby, I think, definitely has athletic raw ability. And if he cleans up that technique, I really think he could be a good left tackle as well.
When you say clean up the technique, what is it that you want to see cleaned up?
Really where he places hands placement, and he really gets at the point of attack, he kind of gets pushed back and he puts all of his all that weight's going on his feet, and he can easily get bowled over. So you really just want to have a more stronger base and really just stand and not get bulldozed. Obviously, power rushes moves are going to put him at a disadvantage if he doesn't have good base. And really just again clean the technique and have a stronger lower base when the passer is coming towards him.
Dyami Brown. Not the kind of rookie year that it's funny, Tyler, because early in training camp, he was standing out. I mean, talking like the first week or two, like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be really good. And I think I even mentioned in something where I'm like, he's going to be their most productive rookie. And honest to God, a week later, I regretted it because you could see as the longer camp went on, the more he became a rookie. So at that point, I'm like, well, I kind of wish I hadn't said that, but I did. So, but it was early on, he looked good. And then, we saw the season. What's your take on him?
I'm right there with you, man. I love Dyami going into the draft last year. I still have, strong feelings for his potential. But, he had really good 2 years in North Carolina. Those last 2 years he was there. He was a deep threat. He needed to work on his route running, and he still does. I just think he's very raw. I think what's really going to help him is having a veteran in that wide receiver room like Terry. You can't learn from anyone better than that, work ethic-wise, and the way Terry, runs routes, gets off the line. So I really am excited for Dyami. Now, I don't think they should be confident. I think they should add another receiver to that room right now based off the way that rookie year. I think it'd be it wouldn't be a good idea to go with those three, especially banking on Curtis's health and Dyami's development. But Dyami, that was a great play against Trayvon Diggs in that Dallas game. He outside, went inside. That was a good catch to the point. High pointed against the safety. So that's the potential that Dyami possesses. Now, we just need him to do it consistently. I think he can do it. He has all the skills. He's good after the catch. He wasn't afraid to go over the middle of North Carolina, and he had one catches where he had an instance to do that in Washington. So I think, the talent is there. It's just you got to let him develop. Receiver is a very hard position to transition to the NFL. Now, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson make it look easy, but those are the exception. They're not the rule.
Right. They are. And right. And I think like the one thing that if for Washington, what you can build on is what he showed a couple things late. And you mentioned the catch against Dallas. And even in that game, they had a nice play design where he's breaking open down the left side, wide open, partly because of play design and his speed, but because Heineke's under pressure and he gets sacked, he couldn't get it to him. But the design and the usage of him was good. And then the last game he had, I think, a pass catch over the middle where it's like, okay, that's good. But we only saw those like once a game. And so you'd want to see a little bit more. And I wonder, watching him play special teams, if that's going to help him. I talked to former special teams coach Ben Kotwica about this, but about you saw him, he had to become a little bit more physical as a gunner getting off the line. Does that help him get off the line a little bit better next year? We'll see. But I'm not going to dismiss him, but I'm with you, Tyler. I think I'd still go out and get another guy because I think it requires a leap of faith to think that he's going to make this huge jump next year. Do you think?
No, I agree. Like I said, it'd be icing on the cake if he does, but I think it'd be putting too many eggs in that basket to say that he will. I think he could still be a quality receiver in this league, maybe a starter one day. But for this team, if they want to compete like next year, like everyone's saying, like Ron is hinting at, they need to go get someone else. Whether it be
he's more than hinting at it. They've got to do it. Yeah. Year 3, it's a big year. So there you go. John Bates, you brought him up, and I felt like, as a blocker, really good. I've talked to Logan Paulson about him too. Really good physical blocker, understands the blocking game. What was your take on him?
Bates, I honestly didn't do too much evaluation of before the draft because I didn't think he'd really be on the radar. Honestly, at that pick, I was thinking maybe they go more for a Brevin Jordan, that 4th round pick in Miami. But Bates looked good. Bates, like I said, his bread and butter at Boise State was blocking, and that would, translated to the NFL. He did a good job. He had really good hands in college. I think even I think McShay or Kuiper said he had the second hands as a tight end opposite, besides Kyle Pitts. And looking back at more film, I do see that he wasn't used at Boise State very much as a pass catching threat. He wasn't used very much so much in Washington for those last second half of the season due to all the injuries with Logan and Ricky Seals-Jones. But I think there's something there. I love the way that, again, he has very strong hands. I like the way he was after the catch as well, especially that Dallas game where he went 20 yards, broke a few tackles, even got a late hit. Yeah, it should have been a personal foul. He was hitting the helmet. But, either way, I think there's something there. I think he'd be definitely a good number 2 tight end, someone they can pair with Logan. And I think that's, it's a high upside player in the 4th round. If you can get a good second tight end, give you 20 to 30 catches a year and a good blocking threat, that's a really good 4th round pick, in my opinion.
It is. I think he, absolutely. And I think the key here for them is that if you want to develop that run game, it's not just the 5-0 lineman. You've got to have tight ends who can do what he does.
Exactly.
Let's turn to the next crop of rookies. You got the Senior Bowl coming up soon, and quarterbacks obviously on the roster. But first of all, I'm curious, who are some of the targets that you had at 11 for this team?
For 11 for that podcast episode I did, there were some guys I kept it to one quarterback. I obviously know that's the biggest need. I kind of looked at Malik Willis, and I go into him a little more going into that Senior Bowl. But there's some other guys. There's other positions need for this team. We know that. I think safety is a big one. You got Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame. He's a guy, if he's there at 11, would be a great pick for Washington. Again, I don't know if he'll be there, but reminds me a lot of Justin Simmons from the Broncos. Great center field type safety.
I like him.
Exactly. You got cornerback Derek Singley Jr. from LSU. He might not be there as well, but he's had some injuries and didn't play much last year, the COVID year. But his freshman year was unreal. He was a top 5 pick after his freshman year. Pair him with William Jackson and Kendall Fuller, and you got a lot to like there. And then obviously you got linebacker position. You got the Georgia's N'Kobe Dean, 6 foot 235, a little bit smaller for a linebacker, but a good sideline ability. And then Devin Lloyd from Utah, another linebacker, 6'3", 235. Sacks, four first fumbles last year. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Darius Leonard. And then last little position I threw in, talking about DeAndre Brown. I think receivers should still be on the table. You never know. You got a guy like Drake London from USC who had 88 catches in 8 games last year. He's 6'5", 215. Kind of reminds me of a Mike Evans type, jump ball guy. And then a guy that from Ohio State, but I liked him a lot at Alabama, coming off torn ACL, but Jamison Williams. I know he's going to slide a little bit for that ACL, but his speed is unreal. I love the way that he's the house from anywhere. Obviously, the ACL is going to maybe hinder that, but I wouldn't be afraid to take him, especially if they trade back a few spots. So those are just some guys I talk about in the podcast that I think that are quality place people for at 11 if they don't go quarterback. And who knows, it might be trading that pick if they're getting a quarterback.
Well, I say that pick might be gone, or they get a guy in free agency or somehow, some other way. Well, I guess it'd be free agency or a trade. So that pick may not be there. Or if they get if they end up being out of the trade and you got to go the Mitch Trubisky route, then you're going to have to draft somebody, but you may wait till the 2nd round. Who knows? But there are other options that will be available to them. Jamison Williams is interesting because he got great speed. And he's a great returner as well. So that, but I think at 11, too high, but like you said, if you trade it back, and he's okay, you can wait for him. I don't know if this team can wait on anybody, but he would be a big help if they did. So let's look at quarterbacks, a couple quarterbacks in particular. You brought up Malik Willis. Why do you say him?
So Malik's a guy, 6'2", 225, big, thick frame. He reminds me a little bit of a Josh Allen. I'm not saying he's Josh Allen, but the way he runs, they do a lot of run plays kind of the same way. He's not as tall as Josh Allen, but I think he's the most talented quarterback in this class. His arm talent is on almost on that Mahomes and Allen type level. He can sling it from anywhere on the field. Take it somewhere. He has beautiful deep ball ability, and he also seems a really good guy in and outside the locker room. A lot of scouts and coaches seem to take a liking to him, and I think the Senior Bowl next week is going to be huge for his draft stock going forward in April. But again, I think he's really dangerous in the pocket. He can, hit a throw from anywhere on the field. But again, he's great outside the pocket of his line run plays. The biggest thing with him is that he could hold on to the ball a little too much. He had 52 sacks. But that could be a byproduct of his bad offensive line at Liberty and, low-level competition that he's playing with. He can miss some receivers sometimes, and that's going to come in time. He's very, very raw. I'm not saying he isn't. It's going to take a year or two for him. But I think the upside on him is the highest of any quarterback in this class, and it's not really close. But going back to what we're talking about, Ron, I don't think this team has that ability to wait for him to be ready. So I don't know how much of an option he could be for Washington, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's the best quarterback in this class, 2-3 years down the line.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that's going to take some time, and you watch him sometimes. And sometimes when I watch him, why did you throw that ball? What led you to that decision to throw that? and sometimes like, is it and it's not always just the talent around him, because like the decision is a decision, right? Whether or not, sometimes you can make a good decision and somebody just makes a good play. And then sometimes like against that coverage, why are you throwing that ball? And that's where he'll have to develop his game. What other areas would you say he has to develop?
Really, like I said, is being a little bit pocket awareness. He definitely, like I said, hold on to the ball too much.
Yeah.
He needs to know when to throw away the ball. And obviously, like you said, some of the decisions go into what you're saying. He needs to really know when it plays over, throw it out of bounds, or also just use a check down. Check down is so important in the NFL. Guys almost reach another level when they realize, hey, I can check this ball down and get 5-10 yards. To see what Mahomes did this last weekend, the Clyde Edwards in it, or when Josh Allen did it to Singletary this last week. So really, once the quarterbacks realize that and just mature in their ability to become a quarterback, it really takes it to the next level. So really, he's going to have to go through those steps and really help reach his potential. He's going to have to go through all those steps and develop himself.
Des Ritter is another guy, and I'm going to bring him up, or even a Carson Strong, because if this team doesn't take one in the first round, which I think it would be difficult unless it's Kenny Pickett sitting there, my guess is they'll have a starter before we get to the draft. So if you let's say you get a free agent, let's say you sign Trubisky, if they went that route, and you're looking at second or third round guys, Des Ritter and Carson Strong. And I know like those guys I know Des Ritter would be on, I'm pretty sure he'll be on their radar. And same with possibly Strong. What do you think of that?
He had a really good college career. Cincinnati, I think, over 40 starts, and that's what you want to see. You want to have a guy that has a lot of college experience. We've seen the guys that have 10, 15 starts that don't pan out, like the Mr. Trubisky's or even Haskins of the world. So you have a lot of film to look on him. Obviously, it's a lower-level competition in the American Athletic Conference. But again, he's a winner. He leads the team to victory. He has a really good arm. Sometimes I feel like he's a little robotic in his movements and the way he moves, in the pocket. So I feel like he's a little stiff in that area. But again, I think he has a lot of abilities that are there to like. I still don't know what to project him as. I don't know if he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think he'd be at the very, very worst, I guess, a really good backup guy that can come in and win you a couple games when you need it. But again, I think his upside, I think, is limited. I think his floor is very high. His ceiling is low.
Okay. Carson Strong, what do you think?
Kind of a little bit opposite. I think Carson Strong has a heck of an arm. I think it's a little bit below Malik Willis and Matt Corral. Another guy that's not very nimble in the pocket per se. He had a lot of injuries, I think, dating back to high school. So I think it's kind of limited his mobility, but there's some upside there. Like I said, I think he has a little bit of a higher ceiling than Ritter. Again, Nevada doesn't have the greatest weapon, so I'm interested to see what he does if he gets to an NFL offense. Let's say he gets here and you have like someone Terry or Curtis and Logan Thomas to throw to that elevates his game at all. But there's some stuff to like there. Like I said, I think there's some that ability that can be tapped in and maybe be a starter in year 2, year 3 at the latest.
And I think there's also going to be questions about his knees as well. So the medicals on him will be very, very important. And again, I bring those guys up because if you're not taking a guy in the first round, I don't think they're taking Matt Corral at 11. Now, if they trade back, who knows? But I don't, so I think that would be, there's really one guy at 11, and then there's projects in this class. So it's going to be, that's why I think that ultimately their starter will come via another way. But you never know, because I've covered this team a long time, and you truly never know. Tyler, thank you very much for coming on and good insight.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Ben and Tyler for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back with another episode on Monday, talking with Michael Phillips of the Richmond Times-Dispatch about the new name and possible stadium sites. Going over it all. I'll talk to you next time.